Hello! This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse. And with me is my guest for Wednesday, Krys Copeland. Hi, Krys.
Hi, Reverend Don. Good to see you again.
And how are you today?
I'm doing well. A little bit tired, but hanging in there. Yeah.
Well, where you are, it's quite late compared to where I am. So,
It's 7
yeah.
p.m. here right now.
And we want to welcome everyone. This is Midday with Reverend Don. As you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can place your questions or comments into our chat room by typing them on whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and they will show up here. We don't have our overlay putting the chat room on the screen today because there are two of us, but we will see it and we will respond to it if you choose to say anything. And to me, that's one of the better parts of this broadcast, having that communication.
Absolutely.
And today we're going to talk about what's new at Corellian Publishing. But first, I want to talk a little bit about last year's 9th convening of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And hello to Nikki in the chat room. It's good to see you, Nikki.
Hi, Nikki.
1 year ago today, the 9th convening of the Parliament of the World's Religions opened in Chicago. And it began with the opening procession and the opening plenary. And later today, I'll be uploading photos from that event. Hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee.
Hi,
Hello
Renee.
to Mary Hawk in the chat room. It's good to see you too.
Hello, Reverend Mary.
And this was a very important event for Corellians, and certainly for me, in that we actually were in that opening procession. We had our own contingent. Hello to Christine Higginbotham in the chat room.
Hi, Christine. Good to see you.
So we got to be part of the celebrational opening march, and three of our highest ranking Corellian leadership were actually on the opening stage, which is a very major thing. And hello to Reverend Antonio in the chat room. It's good to see you, Antonio.
Hi, Reverend Antonio.
I don't really know how to express the importance of that easily, except to say that not just anyone can do that. It was very exciting. It was a great honor to be on that stage, and it was 30 years in the making. Because 30 years ago, at the first modern parliament, we were told that pagans were only barely being tolerated there. And to go from that to being on the opening stage in the opening plenary is a wonderful journey to have completed. And I just don't know how to emphasize that enough. And, it's been quite a 30-year experience dealing with the Parliament and all of the changes that have happened. So this week, we're going to be putting up photos and videos from that 9th convening of the Parliament to remind everyone of the anniversary and just to celebrate the fact that, we are still here. We are still going forward. We're better than we ever were. And we had a wonderful time at the Parliament. We had a major effect at the Parliament in many ways, and we think that deserves to be celebrated. So watch our pages and our platforms to see these various pieces of media. We have a number of videos that will be going up. They'll be going up a little later. For the most part, our videos really start from the second day, at least the videos that I will be putting up. But some of them will probably go up this evening because we've got about 20 videos to put up. And they range from some of the major events that happened to interviews. And hello to Janet Winston in the chat room. Hello to Ed the Pagan in the chat room, who will be my guest tomorrow, talking about one of those events, the Freedom Ritual. Hello to Marcy Dow.
Hi, Marcy.
The 9th convening of the Parliament featured a fabulous ritual put on by the Chicago pagan community and members of the international community that were there, including members of the Corellian tradition and the Aquarian Tabernacle Church. And this was a beautiful ritual. We did videotape it, or that's not really the right word anymore, is it? I'm dating myself, but we have video of it, and that will be going up tomorrow, which is the 1-year anniversary of that ritual. And Ed the Pagan will be on this program to talk about that ritual and why it was so historic. But its theme was freedom, pagan freedom. And this was very important because the whole theme of this year's or that year's parliament was freedom and human rights. And so, of course, that includes pagan freedom and pagan human rights. And so we have that video. We have the video of the regional illustration that was done at the Parliament. We have Tarot Thursday at Parliament. Mary has said that doing tarot on the floor of the Parliament of the World's Religions is an experience she will never forget. So that will be worth watching, I think. Yeah. And then we have interviews with people like Oberon Zell, Elder Lady Amber Dawn. I've got a whole list of them. Sir Rolando Gomez Comon, Ed the Pagan himself, Melanie Silver, Mary Malinsky, the Aquarian Archpriestess for Canada. Ed says in the chat room, it was a truly great event. It was a truly great event. Yeah. And for Corellians, it was a gigantic success for our tradition that we should be very proud of and continue to be proud of. And I hope that this will remind people of what a great moment it was and what a great moment it still is as we go forward. And, you know, the best, as always, is still in the future and yet to be done. So with that, Krys, what do we have to talk about from Corellian Publishing?
Well, I think it ties in a lot with what you were talking about with this, the Parliament of World Religions event being a step forward for us and making progress on that front of rights for pagans and equal religious rights and things like this. Because I have 2 books I want to in particular talk about tonight, along with your book, your new book that's coming out. The first one is Autumn Stoneflower's book. This is for middle grades. It will be released tomorrow. And her book is the first, her debut novel. It's titled Circles in Academy, New Beginnings. And in the book, the 4 girls who attend a Wiccan academy experience hate speech from the townspeople that are in the area of this academy. And you know, our children are faced with this every single day. Pagan children go to school and they have to, you know, worry, just like other, especially in America, that just like other American children, about the common things that happens in American schools already. But on top of that, they have to fear that, one, if they're in the closet and someone finds out and they're in a Christian nationalist state or Christian nationalists were in school, they have to fear for their lives at times. And at the very least, they have to fear for their safety, as well as their mental well-being, whether or not they're going to be bullied. All of these situations that pagan kids face daily, not just in America, but around the world still. And this book gives kids a way of processing that trauma that they experience, as well as not just processing it, but resisting that trauma too, resisting this hate speech and potentially hate crimes that they're experiencing, how to defend themselves from it, how to make sure it doesn't happen. Lots of examples of safety are given in the book, where the girls are told to walk in pairs or walk in groups around town, walk with friends to make sure that, there is safety in numbers. That's very true. So
Hmm.
she uses this realistic fiction story to teach a lot of really good lessons for kids.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
yeah. So I recommend that everyone check that out. If you have a kid that's younger than about 8 years old, you'll have to read the book with them most likely. But if you have an 8 and up reader, then I think that anyone of any age would really enjoy reading this book independently too. But especially for kids age 8 to 15, they're really going to find this book engaging and fun as well as informative.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful book, and you can get your copy at CorellianPublishing.com. It is available for pre-order.
Yes, we have both the ebook and the print version. You can also find them on Amazon as well.
Yes.
In addition to that, also, touching on this concept of how do we fight back against these prejudices that we face every day, ties into Ed Hubbard's new book that will be coming out later this fall, which will be Witch Wars Defense Manual 2, the sequel to the original.
Yes.
And
Most
we've had
infamous book in the pagan world.
yes, and it has been a really fun read. It's been a very long time since I read it, probably just a few years after it was published in 2005, was when I first read it. And, there was a lot of predictions that were made in that
Hmm.
book. And as we're going back through and preparing for Witch Wars 2, I'm realizing that a lot of those predictions either are in progress of coming true
Hmm.
or have already come true.
Yep.
And so I have some to actually point out. If you don't have a copy of the original Witch Wars Defense Manual, go to CorellianPublishing.com. I'll share my screen so you can check this out with me. Let's see here. First on the Witch Wars Defense Manual itself, and then I'll flip over to this one. So you can find that right here, Witch Wars Defense Manual, Volume 2, How to Win. And there is a link for the PDF, which is this tab here that I've just opened up. So you can click on that link and you'll receive a free copy of the original. And so you can right now go online, get that copy, and walk through this with us as we highlight some of the predictions that were made, and you can analyze for yourself just how accurate they were. It's incredibly eerie to see how similar the events that Ed describes almost 20 years ago are now coming to fruition. So first off, let me pull up my notes here so I have those ready to go over the different predictions in the book. All right. So the first one was on increased digital warfare in pagan communities. Obviously, we knew that digital interaction was going to be taking place, but back in 2005, we were seeing the decline of the Satanic Panic. We were seeing a
Hmm.
rise in our growth as a pagan community, our growth in our rights, and now what we're seeing is Witch Wars doing just like what the rest of human society is doing, which is feeding into fake news, feeding into propaganda, and that's being spread rapidly online.
Hmm.
So we'll take a look at a couple of passages on that here. Let me pull up the first one. Oh, that's not it. Let's see here. What's the word that I need to type to find that? Digital. Yes. So the info tactics. So this one right here, you can read into this, but it talks about a forecast from Dr. Toffler, and then Ed expands on that prediction that we're going to see info tactics being used. Now we see that as misinformation or
Hmm.
disinformation wars, but it's basically the same thing that Ed was talking about 20 years ago and targeted towards pagans. So if you're
Hmm.
in the chat right now, think back to something that you may have seen online, maybe coming from Christian nationalist groups or from a Christian source, or possibly even another pagan source that was disinformation or misinformation about what pagans and Wiccans are, what we believe, and what rights we should have in this society. I bet you can probably think of probably one you've seen today or within the past week that was completely incorrect information. Reverend Don, do you have any examples from your own experience with, going through social media and seeing that example of info wars?
Oh, the
Fake
recent
info wars?
Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Last Supper nonsense, which was totally unconnected to it, and um, the most recent thing is trying to misportray the statue of Nike, which is one of the most famous statues in the world. You'd have to have no education at all not to know what it is. But a lot of these people who are subject to this have been raised now in a generation where they didn't get that education. Um, People with any idea either of world history or art history would recognize the winged Nike. But if you don't have that, it's being represented as a satanic angel. And, um, and there are people buying this nonsense because they don't know otherwise.
Absolutely. Ed also goes into the book, and so when Ed writes the new version of this book, the Witch Wars
Hmm.
Part Two, he's going to revisit some of these predictions and really show examples and analyze where parts of this have come true, and then parts where it didn't, where his prediction either didn't pan out exactly as
Hmm.
he predicted, why that prediction was not fully 100% on, what influenced that, and really go through kind of chapter by chapter with you on what this means now. We'll take a look at another example, going back to this, where with the Olympics, where Christians began accusing the Olympics leaders or designers um, of bringing in these antichrist pagan symbols uh, into into the Olympics, which is a pagan
Yeah.
celebration. Um, and
Imagine Greek symbols in the Olympic celebration.
exactly, exactly. Next, they'll start accusing the Greeks of being queer. So yeah. Um, but that part about everything being anti-Christian, that part about
Hmm.
everything being of Satan. Uh, if I'm pulling up here, he has 36 mentions of
Hmm.
Satan or the Satanic Panic throughout here, and um, uh, uh, different predictions about what was going to happen with Christians, declaring anything that was not Christian as pro Satan,
Yep.
or pro evil. And he talks about why we needed pagan pride for that reason,
Hmm.
why we needed to um, defend ourselves and show that Satanism is actually a branch of Christianity. I
Hmm.
actually have a lot of Satanist friends. I think they're wonderful people, and I agree with a lot of their tenets. But they're still a Christian denomination,
Yeah.
and they have no real connection as far as belief system to paganism that I have
Hmm.
seen anyway. And they would say the same thing about us, and with all respect and love between the two groups.
Hmm.
Um, and
Well,
with
that's always been. I mean, there's some groups that kind of straddle that line, but for the most part, they've always been very distinct groups,
yeah,
and both sides have been clear on that. We want to say hello to Cassandra. in the chat room.
Hi,
And that
Cassandra.
actually doesn't speak ill of either. It just says that we both have our own things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like comparing Chinese porcelain to Delft Blauw, which is a type of porcelain created here in the Netherlands. Both beautiful, beautiful porcelain crafts,
Mhm.
but both with very different histories. Even though they might look similar on the surface, they have different histories, different methods, and a different culture that they evolve from. And
Mhm.
it's the same with modern paganism and modern Satanism. They evolved from different religious cultures.
Mhm.
Um, but they're still, equally valid paths to follow. However, because of fundamentalist Christianity, believing that anything that is not of them is of Satan, and Satan equals evil, and they don't really bother to look into that any deeper than that surface level, very childish viewpoint. Um, they 20 years ago, Ed made this prediction that everything
Mhm.
would be satanic, just
Yep.
everything. And that includes queer people, that includes books about people of color. All of it's Satan, all of it needs to be burned, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing today. Um, the other amazing thing about this is that while Ed gave some really good tactics for how to fight these things back in the day, it
Yeah.
still was from 20 years ago. So
Mhm.
just at the start of YouTube, just at the start of online social media, and now things are so different. How do we fight it now? And he's coined this term reputational conflict. And I think that he's spoken with you at great length about this. Do you want to touch on what that is from what you understand of his sharing?
Um, I don't know that I will describe it exactly as he would describe it, but I think what we're talking about is fighting over personality rather than over issue.
Hmm.
And you don't have to look any farther than the current presidential race to see exactly that sort of thing. Um, but you also see it throughout society. You certainly see it within the metaphysical community. You certainly um, see it in many other places, and it has certainly become the de facto way of people having their fights.
Yeah.
And what's most important about this are the techniques that he'll be talking about. The thing about the Witch Wars Defense Manual that I've always thought was most valuable, and like Edward himself, I didn't remember how much it actually spoke about Christian nationalism or Christian dominionism or whatever we're called, whatever it changes its name to this week.
Yes.
But it does talk about it extensively because it's really under the same subject heading. It's how do we defend ourselves against those who would harm us? But it's the techniques that he talks about in the book. And we'll talk about again in the new book and many new things because times have changed.
Mhm.
At the time this book was published, most people did not understand the techniques that they were seeing in the witch wars that were still raging far more vehemently than they have in subsequent years. Um, and he talks about disinformation campaigns, for example. Um, he talks about the idea of one person increasing their status by attacking a person of a higher status, and why this was a technique, and how not to be confused, how not to be deceived by those techniques. And this caused about half of the metaphysical community to wet its pants. Partly because they were using these techniques. They didn't want people to understand it, because once you understand it, it doesn't work anymore. Um, and you'll notice witch wars drastically decreased after the publication of this book. Even though I don't think more than 100 copies were ever sold of it, but it was copied everywhere.
Yeah.
And suddenly you couldn't do the same deceptive thing that people had been doing because people now understood what it was. And witch wars were usually all deceptive techniques. Very occasionally there was a real disagreement going on, but more often it was just a petty power struggle over irrelevant issues um, that were sold to people in deceptive manners. And
Mhm.
there are still people doing that. But this book helped you to understand what that deception was. So I highly recommend, if you have not read the original, go to that link and read it.
Yeah. The
Um,
the
yeah.
deception that you talk about, finding out that deception is huge. He has a whole section in this book about techniques for of finding those particular infiltrators, really
Hmm.
witches that come into our pagan community, or pagans that come into our pagan community, who are actually not here to benefit the community,
Yeah.
whether they know this consciously, or they're a brainwashed plant from leaving a Christian church. We've seen both in come in and out of this community, and
Hmm.
usually they do get caught. So one is, how do you avoid them
Hmm.
altogether? And then how do you detect them if you do sense them in your presence? And then how do you remove them from
Yeah.
the group without creating a new war,
Yes.
without causing additional harm to this? And one thing I found fascinating was Ed was very quick to point out to me that this book is not meant to unify in any way the pagan community or other communities with the pagan community. That is not what this book is meant to do. What it's meant to do is protect your pagan community,
Hmm.
to protect you and the people around you that you worship with, that you celebrate with, and make sure that you stay safe
Hmm.
during
Yeah.
this, throughout this coming election, throughout the next 4 or 8 years in America, um,
Hmm.
and make sure that you more than survive them, but still thrive during them, still have your group thrive during them.
Well,
Um,
another technique that I feel we should mention, that you see a lot in people's attempts at witch wars, is to make a highly emotional argument purporting to prove something that they never actually really address.
mhm.
That they attempt to then win you over emotionally, making you think they're winning you over intellectually.
It's emotional
And
whataboutism, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Um, they may make an argument that doesn't actually prove their point, but they get so emotional about it that they get people to side with them. And they never stop to look at the actual argument, which usually will fall apart.
Yeah. And
And
now with the
this is the thing.
And yeah, absolutely. And now with the advent of online communities, because a lot of us practice together online, we've also seen it invade those spaces as well. So
Oh
in
yeah.
this updated version, there will be a lot more, a whole section on digital defense, and also this is more than digital defense; it's digital offense against anyone who does try to cause a witch war within our community.
Hmm.
This isn't meant to solely defend. This is meant to make sure that they don't try it ever again.
Well, it is subtitled "How to Win."
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
This is not fluff stuff. So definitely, this is more um, hardcore and straightforward and very blunt. And I do like that style from Ed. Although I tend to be a little bit more fluffy myself, Ed does that very well in his
oh yes,
writing.
he does. He is
Yes,
not known for
subtlety.
yeah.
Yeah,
He's known for hitting the subject on the head.
exactly.
And there are people who've called him the most dangerous pagan in the community, partly on the strength of this book. And he is, because he will tell you the deceptive techniques that people are using to try to get past you. And those people have always been terribly, terribly offended by that.
Speaking truth to power, it makes enemies.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And
It
Ed is known to speak truth to any power that comes at him. So,
yes, he
yeah.
does. This is true. With that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. So if you're interested in getting the Witch Wars Defense Manual Volume 2, How to Win, you can pre-order that at CorellianPublishing.com.
Yes, and you can. I believe we will also make it available on Amazon as well at some point.
Yes.
So, but you can go ahead and pre-order it today on the website.
And with that, we've come to the end of our half hour. So let us close with our prayer as we always do. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tomorrow, I'll be back with the pagan as my guest, and we'll be talking about the freedom ritual from last year's Parliament of the World's Religions and why it was important and why working for our rights and freedom remain important and will always be important. And unfortunately, will also always have to be fought for. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to be vigilant for our own safety and welfare. Help us to defend ourselves from those things that might try to harm us, and instead to find a safe and beneficial way through life. Beloved ones, we rejoice in your presence in our life and the leadership that you give us. And knowing you are always with us, still from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence. May you be blessed now and always. Thank you for joining me, Krys.
Great to be here.